Welcome to the fifth section of our course, where we explore the essential rules of healthcare compliance, fraud, and abuse. In this lesson, you will learn about the strict laws and regulations that govern how medical facilities bill the government and commercial insurance companies. This topic is absolutely critical, because a single coding mistake or unethical billing practice can lead to massive financial penalties or even criminal charges for a hospital. I am so excited to guide you through this legal landscape, as understanding compliance is what separates an average coder from a highly respected professional credential holder. Get ready to learn how to protect your facility and your own career, because this knowledge is heavily tested on the certification exam. Let us begin by defining what healthcare compliance actually means in your daily work as a medical coder. Compliance simply means following all the federal laws, state regulations, and official coding guidelines exactly as they are written, without cutting any corners. In the healthcare industry, the government is the largest purchaser of medical services through the Medicare and Medicaid programs. Because the government is spending taxpayer money, they have created very strict rules to ensure they only pay for medical care that is absolutely necessary, correctly documented, and accurately coded. A major focus of your exam is knowing the exact difference between fraud and abuse, which are two very distinct legal concepts. The difference between the two entirely comes down to a person's intent. Fraud is an intentional, deliberate deception or misrepresentation made by a person who knows the statement is false, and it could result in an unauthorized payment. Abuse, on the other hand, involves practices that are inconsistent with sound medical or business practices, resulting in an unnecessary cost, but without the intentional deception found in fraud. To make fraud perfectly clear, let us look at a real-world example that you might see on your exam. If a doctor knowingly bills Medicare for a complex surgical procedure that they never actually performed, that is a clear-cut case of healthcare fraud. Another example of fraud is intentionally altering a patient's medical record to justify a more expensive treatment that the patient did not actually need, because the person acting knew exactly what they were doing and intended to steal money. The federal government treats fraud as a very serious criminal offense. Abuse is slightly different, because it often happens accidentally due to poor training, outdated billing software, or simply being careless with the coding rules. An example of abuse is a hospital accidentally billing for a medication at a higher dosage than what the patient actually received, simply because the coder misread the chart, even though the hospital did not actively plot to steal money. Their sloppy business practices still cost the government unnecessary funds. While abuse is generally not a criminal act, the hospital is still required to return the overpaid money and may face strict financial penalties. The most powerful tool the federal government uses to combat both fraud and abuse is called the False Claims Act. The False Claims Act is a federal law that makes it illegal for any person or organization to knowingly submit a false or fraudulent claim for payment to the government. If a hospital violates this act, they can be forced to pay back 3 times the amount of the false claim, plus massive additional fines for every single incorrect code submitted. The government aggressively uses the False Claims Act to recover billions of stolen healthcare dollars every single year. A very unique and highly tested feature of the False Claims Act is the whistleblower provision, which is also known by the legal term qui tam. This provision allows an ordinary citizen, such as a medical coder or a nurse, to file a lawsuit on behalf of the United States government if they discover their employer is committing fraud, to encourage people to speak up. The law offers the whistleblower a percentage of the money the government successfully recovers from the fraudulent hospital. It also provides strong legal protection to ensure the whistleblower cannot be fired or punished by their employer for reporting the crime. Another major law you must know is the Anti-Kickback Statute, which is designed to keep medical decisions completely objective. This law makes it a criminal offense to knowingly offer, pay, solicit, or receive any form of valuable reward in exchange for referring patients to a facility that bills Medicare. For example, a hospital cannot offer a doctor cash bonuses, free office rent, or expensive vacations in exchange for the doctor sending all their surgical patients to that specific hospital. The government wants to guarantee that a doctor recommends a hospital based entirely on the quality of medical care, not on secret financial bribes. Closely related to kickbacks is the physician self-referral law, which is almost always referred to as the Stark Law on your exam. The Stark Law strictly prohibits a physician from referring Medicare patients for certain health services to a business where the physician or their immediate family member has a financial ownership interest. For instance, if a doctor secretly owns a private physical therapy clinic, the Stark Law prevents them from forcing all their Medicare patients to go to that specific clinic for treatment. Unlike the Anti-Kickback Statute, which requires proving intentional bribery, the Stark Law is a strict liability statute, meaning you can be penalized even if you did not intend to break the law. The federal agency directly responsible for enforcing these laws and policing the Medicare system is the Office of Inspector General, commonly known as the OIG. The OIG acts as the ultimate watchdog for the Department of Health and Human Services, conducting massive audits, complex investigations, and facility inspections when a hospital is caught committing severe fraud. The OIG has the power to permanently exclude that hospital from ever participating in the Medicare program again, which effectively forces the hospital to close. You must remember that the OIG is the primary enforcer of healthcare compliance. Every single year, the OIG publishes a highly important document called the OIG Work Plan, which medical coders must review. The work plan outlines exactly which specific coding practices, medical procedures, and hospital departments the OIG plans to aggressively audit during the upcoming year. For example, if the work plan states they will be looking closely at emergency room billing, every hospital compliance department will immediately conduct internal reviews of their emergency room codes. Knowing what the OIG is looking for allows hospitals to proactively fix their mistakes before the government auditors arrive, to prevent violations from happening in the first place. The OIG strongly recommends that every healthcare facility establish a formal corporate compliance program. A strong compliance program acts as a hospital's internal safety net, establishing a culture that promotes ethical behavior and strict adherence to the law. The OIG has defined 7 core elements that every effective compliance program must have, including appointing a dedicated compliance officer, conducting regular employee training, and creating a confidential hotline for reporting issues. Questions regarding these 7 essential elements are practically guaranteed to appear on your certification test. Within the broader corporate compliance program, the coding department must have its own specific written policies and procedures. These coding policies act as an internal rulebook, clearly defining exactly how coders should handle confusing documentation or conflicting coding guidelines. Having written policies ensures that every single coder in the department is assigning codes consistently and correctly, rather than relying on personal opinions. If the government ever audits the hospital, the very first thing they will ask to see is the coding department's official policy manual. One of the biggest compliance risks a coder must avoid is the illegal practice of UP coding, which we briefly touched on earlier. Upcoding is the deliberate assignment of a diagnostic or procedural code that pays more money than the code that actually reflects the service provided. For example, coding a complex open surgical repair when the doctor only performed a simple external bandage application is a massive compliance violation. Upcoding directly violates the False Claims Act because it intentionally drains money from the Medicare Trust Fund. Another major compliance violation you must guard against is unbundling, which is sometimes called exploding a package. Unbundling occurs when a coder uses multiple individual codes for the separate steps of a procedure, instead of using the single, comprehensive code that covers the entire process. If a surgeon removes a patient's gallbladder, making the surgical incision and closing the wound are considered natural parts of that surgery. Billing separately for the incision, the removal, and the stitches is unbundling, and it artificially inflates the hospital's reimbursement in a highly illegal way. To help catch these billing errors, the government uses third-party auditing companies known as recovery audit contractors, or RACs. A RAC is a private company hired by Medicare to review past hospital claims and identify exact instances where the hospital was overpaid or underpaid. The unique thing about RACs is that they are paid on a contingency basis, meaning they earn a percentage of the money they successfully take back from the hospital, because their paycheck depends on finding your mistakes. RAC auditors are incredibly thorough, making accurate coding more important than ever. When government auditors find a consistent pattern of coding errors, they often use a terrifying mathematical technique called extrapolation. During an extrapolation audit, the government does not look at every single patient chart in the hospital, which would take years. Instead, they thoroughly audit a small, random sample of claims, calculate the error rate, and then apply that error rate to every single claim the hospital submitted that year. This means a few small coding mistakes found in a sample can quickly mathematically multiply into a multi-million-dollar fine for the facility. To protect themselves from RAC audits and extrapolation, hospitals perform their own routine internal coding audits. During an internal audit, an experienced senior coder reviews the work of the other coding staff to ensure accuracy and identify any areas where the staff needs more education. If the internal auditor discovers that a coder is consistently assigning the wrong code for a specific disease, the compliance officer will arrange a targeted training session to correct the behavior. Finding and fixing your own mistakes internally is always much safer and cheaper than letting the government find them for you. As a certified coding associate, you are strictly bound by the AHIMA Code of Ethics, which is the professional standard for all health information practitioners. This code explicitly states that you must only assign codes that are fully supported by the physician's clinical documentation, regardless of any pressure from your boss to increase hospital revenue. You must never alter or manipulate codes to maximize payment if the medical record does not justify it. Adhering to this ethical code protects your personal credential, protects your employer from fraud investigations, and ultimately protects the integrity of the entire healthcare system. Congratulations on completing the 5th section of this course, where you have learned the serious legal and ethical boundaries of the medical coding profession. Now, I absolutely encourage you to complete the attached practice test for this specific section on healthcare compliance, fraud, and abuse. Working through practice questions is the most effective way to test your understanding of these complex laws and improve your readiness for the actual exam. The practice test is included right here with this lesson, so please take a few minutes to engage in active learning. Keep up your amazing dedication, and I will see you in our final section where we will tackle the vital rules of patient privacy and data security.